I honestly thought Graham Bell was just having one of those nights. That was the first lie I told myself. You have to understand what our street was like before everything happened. Briar Lane wasn't the sort of place where people screamed, vanished, or did anything worth reporting. It was a small cul-de-sac tucked behind a row of shops in North Yorkshire, the kind of place where bins were brought in before tea, curtains twitched without shame, and everyone pretended not to know everyone else's business while knowing every bit of it. I lived at number 12, in a narrow brick terrace with a front room that always felt cold no matter how high I put the heating. My name is Eleanor Price. I was 39 then, working nights at a care home outside Harrogate, and I had got used to strange hours, strange silences, and the feeling that the rest of the world carried on while I was half asleep. That week, I had flu. Not a dramatic illness, not one of those awful hospital things, just the kind that makes your bones feel wet and your head feel packed with wool. I had called in sick, which I almost never did, and spent most of the evening wrapped in a blanket on the sofa, sipping Lemsip that had gone cold and watching the rain bead against the window. It was close to 3 a.m. when I first heard the scraping. At first, I thought it was the branches of the old sycamore dragging along the gutter. The wind had been up all night, and the rain came in hard little bursts, tapping at the glass like fingernails. But then it came again. Scrape, pause, scrape, a heavy sound, metal into earth. I remember sitting up slowly, with the blanket still around my shoulders, annoyed more than frightened. That is the embarrassing part. My first thought was not, something is wrong. It was, who on earth is gardening at this hour? I pulled the curtain back just enough to look across the road. Graham Bell was standing in his back garden. I could see him because the security light over his patio had come on, washing everything in that hard white glow that makes people look dead before they are. He was wearing pajama bottoms, a wax jacket over a bare chest, and one brown slipper. Just one. His other foot was sunk ankle deep in the mud. He had a spade in both hands. He was digging, not casually, not like someone planting bulbs or burying a dead pet. He was digging with a kind of grim, exhausted urgency, throwing soil over his shoulder in wet clumps. His back rose and fell. His head hung low. Rain ran off his thinning gray hair and down his neck, but he did not seem to notice. I whispered to myself, "Graham, what are you doing?" The strange thing was, I had always thought of Graham as harmless. Quiet, yes. A bit stiff, maybe. He used to polish his little silver car every Sunday morning, even in winter. He kept lavender by the front wall because his wife Moira had liked the smell. He always nodded when he saw me, but rarely said more than a sentence. Then Moira disappeared. People said she had left him. Some said she had gone to stay with her sister in Scarborough. Others said there had been a row. I never asked. On streets like ours, asking directly is considered worse than gossiping behind someone's back. After that, Graham changed. His curtain stayed closed, milk bottles gathered by the door. The lavender died in its pots. Sometimes when I came home from a night shift, I would see him standing in the hallway with the front door open, looking out as if he had forgotten what he came for. But this was different. This was not grief. This was purpose. I told myself to leave it. I honestly did. I let the curtain fall and stood there in the dark front room, listening to the rain and that steady scrape from across the lane. I even laughed under my breath because it felt ridiculous to be scared of a man with a spade. But then everything seemed fine, like nothing would happen, and that made it worse. The scraping stopped. For a few seconds there was only rain. Then Graham spoke. I could not hear the words properly through the glass, but I saw his mouth moving. He was looking down into the hole, nodding slightly, as if someone inside it had asked him a question. That was when my stomach turned. I stepped closer to the window again. Graham bent low, pressing one hand to the edge of the hole, and tilted his head, listening. Then he smiled, not wadly. Just a small, private smile, the sort you might give someone who had said something kind. A taxi rolled slowly into the cul-de-sac then, its tires hissing over the wet road. For a moment, I felt relieved, because ordinary things have a way of saving you from your own imagination. The driver stopped outside number 8, probably lost, probably checking an address. His headlights swept across Graham's garden. The driver saw him. I know he did, because the taxi did not move for several seconds. Then the driver leaned forward behind the wheel, staring through the rain at Graham Bell, at the hole, at the mud, at whatever Graham had been listening to. And then something happened that I still think about. The taxi driver reversed. Not slowly, not carefully. He reversed so fast he clipped the curb, mounted the corner pavement, and nearly hit Joyce Whitaker's recycling bin. Then he slammed the car into gear and sped out of Briar Lane like he had seen someone standing in the road with a knife. That should have been enough for me. I should have called the police then. I should have locked my doors, gone upstairs, and stayed away from the windows. Instead, I kept watching. Graham did not react to the taxi at all. He only lifted the spade again and drove it into the mud with a wet, final sound. Then he said something louder. This time I heard it. It's quieter underneath. My hand slipped from the curtain. For a moment, I could not move. The front room felt smaller than it had before. The rain sounded too close, like it was falling inside the walls. I became suddenly aware of every ordinary thing around me. The mug on the table, my slippers, the ticking boiler, the phone lying face down on the sofa. I was alone in the house. That fact landed heavily. I told myself I was being stupid. Graham was grieving. He was tired, maybe drunk, maybe sleepwalking. Maybe there was a burst pipe or a fox trapped under the shed. There were sensible explanations. There always are, right up until there are not. Then his security light clicked off. The garden vanished, but the digging continued in the dark. I didn't go back to sleep after that. I told myself I would pull the blanket tighter, lay back on the sofa, even shut my eyes. But every time I started to drift, I could still hear it. Not loud, not frantic, just steady, like someone working late into the night, determined to finish something that couldn't wait until morning. Scrape, pause, scrape. It got inside my head in a way I can't quite explain. You know when a sound repeats long enough that it stops being noise and starts feeling like a thought? Like it's not coming from outside anymore, but from somewhere behind your eyes? That's what it was like. I checked the time at some point, 4:30, I think. The rain had eased by then, reduced to that fine mist that hangs in the air rather than falls. The street was quiet, too quiet. No cars, no footsteps, no distant hum of early traffic. Just that sound from across the road. And then it stopped. Not gradually, not fading, just gone. That silence, it wasn't comforting. It was the sort of silence that feels deliberate, like something has chosen to stop making noise because it knows you're listening. I sat there, holding my breath without realizing it, and then after a few seconds, something else replaced it. A dragging sound, soft, wet, uneven. I moved back to the window before I could stop myself. This time I pulled the curtain a bit wider. Graham was no longer digging. He was hauling something across the garden. At first, I thought it was just a sack of soil or garden waste. A black bin bag, the heavy-duty kind. He had both hands wrapped around the top, dragging it backwards toward the hole. His shoulders hunched, his movements slower now, more careful. But there was something wrong with the way it moved. It didn't slide cleanly over the grass. It caught, twisted, shifted shape in small, uneven jerks. I remember squinting, trying to focus through the glass, telling myself it was just the angle, just the rain, just the light. Then the bag twitched, not much, just a small, sudden movement near the middle, like something inside it had adjusted its weight. I actually laughed. A short, breathless sound that didn't feel like mine. Fox, I whispered. It's a fox. We get them around here sometimes. They get into bins, make a mess, get themselves stuck. It wasn't unusual. It wasn't anything to panic about, except Graham stopped dragging. He looked down at the bag and he spoke again, quietly, calmly, the way you'd speak to a child who didn't understand something. No, he said, not yet. I felt something cold spread through my chest. He crouched slowly, lowering himself beside the bag, one knee sinking into the mud. His hand hovered over it for a moment, then pressed down, firm, deliberate, like he was holding something in place. The bag went still, completely still. I don't know how long I stood there. It couldn't have been more than a minute, but it felt longer. Long enough for my mind to run through every possible explanation and reject each one just as quickly. This is where people say they knew something was wrong. I didn't. I knew something didn't make sense. That's different. It's smaller, easier to ignore. Graham stood again, wiped his hand on his jacket, and dragged the bag the rest of the way to the hole. He didn't struggle with it. Not really. Just a steady pull, like whatever was inside had accepted where it was going. When he reached the edge, he paused, looked down. Then, with a small grunt, he tipped it forward. The bag slid over the lip and disappeared. There was no sound when it landed. No thud. No rustle. Nothing. Just absence. Graham stayed there for a few seconds, staring into the hole. Then he did something that made my throat tighten. He nodded, like someone had thanked him. I took a step back from the window. Properly this time. Not just shifting my weight, but actually putting distance between me and what I was seeing. My back hit the wall behind the sofa, and I stayed there, staring at the floor, trying to slow my breathing. "Don't be ridiculous," I muttered. "You're ill. You're tired. That's all this is." But even as I said it, I could still see the way that bag had moved, still hear the way he'd said, "Not yet." I forced myself to look again. Graham was walking toward his shed now, his posture different, looser, almost relieved. The security light flickered as he passed beneath it, then steadied again. He opened the shed door, and for a moment, just a moment, the light inside caught something behind him. More bags, stacked, not neatly, not like rubbish waiting to be taken out. They were piled in a corner, slumped against each other at odd angles. One of them shifted, only slightly. But enough. I froze. Graham didn't react. He stepped inside, out of view, and the shed door swung partially closed behind him, leaving just a thin slice of light cutting across the garden. I don't remember deciding to move. 1 second I was in the front room, the next I was in the hallway, staring at my coat hanging by the door. I actually reached for it. That's the worst part. Somewhere in my head, something was already trying to make sense of it, trying to be helpful, trying to say, "You should check, you should go over it. What if someone's hurt? What if he needs help?" It sounded reasonable. It sounded responsible. It did not sound like fear. But my hand stopped halfway to the coat because something else cut through it. A thought that didn't feel like mine. Stay inside. It came with a feeling more than a voice, a tightness in my chest, a weight in my stomach, like every instinct I had was suddenly pushing in the same direction. Don't go out there. I stood there for a long time, my fingers hovering inches from the fabric, listening to the faint creak of the shed door across the street. Then slowly, I stepped back, locked the door, checked it twice, and went upstairs. I didn't look out of the window again. Not that night. But as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to ignore the pounding in my head and the ache in my chest, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. Not just with Graham, with the street, with the air itself. Like whatever he dropped into that hole hadn't stayed there. And just before I finally drifted into a shallow, restless sleep, I could have sworn I heard something else. Not digging, not dragging, breathing. Slow, deep, and coming from somewhere beneath the house. I didn't mean to go over there. That's the thing I keep coming back to. I didn't wake up thinking, today's the day I walk across the road and confront the man dragging twitching bags into a hole in his garden. I woke up feeling worse. Head pounding, throat raw, that heavy, feverish ache behind the eyes. And for a few minutes, everything from the night before felt distant, like something I dreamt badly and half forgotten. But then I went downstairs, and the first thing I noticed was the smell. Damp earth. Not strong, not overwhelming, just there, faint but wrong. Like someone opened a bag of soil in the room and left it overnight. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, sniffing the air, trying to place it, and that's when I heard it again. Scrape. Not loud, not frantic, just steady, coming from outside. I closed my eyes for a second. "Of course," I muttered. "Of course he's still at it." Part of me wanted to ignore it. Put the kettle on, turn the telly up, pretend I hadn't heard anything. That would have been the sensible thing, the safe thing. But there's something about daylight that makes fear feel foolish. You tell yourself it was just the dark, just your imagination, just the way shadows stretch and sounds carry at night. In the morning, everything is supposed to make sense again. So I made a cup of tea. I drank half of it, and then before I could talk myself out of it, I pulled on my coat, slipped my shoes on without tying them properly, and stepped out onto the street. The air was cold, sharp enough to cut through the fog in my head. The rain had stopped, but everything still glistened. Cars, pavements, fences, all slick with moisture. It was quiet in that way early mornings are, where the world feels paused, waiting for people to wake up and start making noise again. Graham's back gate was open. That alone was strange enough. He never left it open, not even when Moira was still around. He was particular about things like that. I stood on the pavement for a moment, looking at it, feeling that same hesitation from the night before creeping back in. You don't have to do this, I thought. But then I heard the spade hit the ground again, and I told myself, if someone's hurt, if he's not well, you can't just stand here. So I crossed the road. Each step felt heavier than it should have, like I was walking through something thicker than air. By the time I reached the gate, my chest was tight, my fingers cold despite the coat sleeves pulled over them. I pushed it open. It creaked. Graham didn't stop digging. He was in the same place as before, though the hole was deeper now. Much deeper. The edges were uneven, the soil piled high around it, dark and wet. He stood inside it, up to just below his knees, his body moving in that same slow, repetitive rhythm. For a moment, I just watched him. Up close, he looked worse than he had from the window. Paler, thinner. His eyes, when he finally lifted his head, were sunken, ringed with a grayish shadow that made him look like he hadn't slept in days. There was mud on his hands, under his nails, smeared across his arms like he'd stopped noticing it hours ago. But when he saw me, he smiled, genuinely. Morning, Eleanor. That threw me more than anything. Not the hole, not the digging, not even the memory of the bag. The fact that he sounded normal. Morning, I said, my voice coming out rougher than I intended. I cleared my throat. You're up early. He gave a small shrug, driving the spade into the earth again. Didn't sleep much. I forced a laugh. Yeah, I gathered. He chuckled at that, like we were sharing a joke. Like this was just two neighbors making conversation over the fence. But it wasn't. I took a step closer, careful not to get too near the edge of the hole. Graham, what are you doing? It came out softer than I meant it to. Less like a confrontation, more like a question you already regret asking. He paused, not for long, just enough to lean on the handle of the spade, catching his breath. Making space, he said. For what? He tilted his head slightly, as if considering how to explain it in a way I'd understand. You ever notice, he began, how loud everything is up here? I frowned. What do you mean? All the time, he continued, gesturing vaguely with one hand. People talking, cars, telly through the walls, pipes rattling. Even when it's quiet, it's not really quiet, is it? I didn't answer. He looked down into the hole. But down there, he said, his voice dropping, almost reverent, it's different. A chill ran up my spine. Different how? He smiled again, that same small, private smile I'd seen the night before. It listens, I swallowed. Graham, are you all right? There it was. The question I'd come over to ask. He looked up at me then, properly this time, and for a second, just a second, I thought I saw something flicker in his expression. Something sharp, something that didn't belong in a casual conversation between neighbors. But it was gone almost immediately. I'm better than I've been, he said. That's not really an answer. He laughed softly, shaking his head. No, I suppose it's not. There was a moment of silence, the kind that stretches, uncomfortable, waiting for someone to fill it. I glanced toward the shed without meaning to. The door was closed now. Graham, I started again, more carefully this time. Last night, I thought I saw you dragging something, a bag. He didn't react, not at first. Then he sighed like I'd brought up something tedious. Just clearing things out, he said. You know how it is. I didn't. And the shed? I asked. There were more, Eleanor. He cut me off gently, but firmly. I looked back at him. He was watching me now, really watching me, his eyes clearer than they had been a moment ago. You shouldn't worry yourself over it, he said. You're not well. You need rest. Something about the way he said it made my skin prickle. I'm fine, I said a bit too quickly. He smiled again, but it didn't quite reach his eyes this time. No, he said softly. You're not. I felt my face flush, a mix of irritation and something else I didn't want to name. I hesitated, glancing at the hole again. Do you need help? I mean, this is a lot to take on by yourself. There it was. The moment. The point where I could have turned around, gone back home, locked the door, and stayed out of it. Instead, I offered. Graham looked at me for a long moment. Then he did something I wasn't expecting. He climbed out of the hole, slowly, carefully placing the spade aside, pulling himself up onto the damp grass. Up close, he smelled faintly of soil and something else, something stale, like a room that hadn't been aired out in a long time. He wiped his hands on his jacket, then looked at me with that same calm, almost grateful expression. "You're a good neighbor, Eleanor," he said. I shifted uncomfortably. "I'm just asking." "I know," he replied. He stepped closer. Not too close. Just enough that I could see the fine tremor in his fingers, the dirt caught in the creases of his skin. That's the way his breathing had steadied now that he'd stopped digging. "For what it's worth," he added, his voice quieter now, "it's not as hard as it looks." I let out a small, uncertain laugh. "Digging a hole in your garden?" He shook his head. "No," he said, letting go. Something in my chest tightened. Before I could respond, he turned back toward the hole, picking up the spade again. "I'll manage," he said over his shoulder. "But thank you." That should have been the end of it. I should have nodded, said something polite, and gone back inside. But I didn't move. I stood there, watching him lift the spade once more, watching the earth give way beneath it, watching the hole deepen by inches. And as I stood there, something strange happened. The sound of the digging, it didn't bother me anymore. If anything, it felt rhythmic, steady, almost calming. I blinked, frowning slightly, trying to shake the thought loose, but it lingered. And before I realized what I was doing, I heard myself say, "If you change your mind." Graham didn't look up, but I saw the corner of his mouth lift. "Oh," he said, driving the spade into the soil again. "I think I already have." I told myself I wasn't going to go back. That's important. I didn't walk away from Graham's garden thinking, I'll pop round later and help him dig his strange little hole. I went home, shut the door, and stood in the hallway for a long time, staring at nothing, trying to shake off the feeling that something had shifted inside me. Because it had. That's the part people don't talk about when things start to go wrong. It's not always sudden, not always dramatic. Sometimes it's just a small adjustment, like a picture frame knocked slightly crooked, and you don't notice it at first. But once you do, you can't stop seeing it. I made another cup of tea. Didn't drink it. I sat on the sofa, wrapped in the same blanket, the telly on in the background, some morning program with overly cheerful presenters talking about weekend recipes, but I couldn't focus on any of it. All I could hear was that sound. Scrape, pause, scrape. Only now it wasn't coming from outside, or at least it didn't feel like it was. It felt closer, like it had followed me back in. I rubbed my temples, trying to ease the pressure building behind my eyes. "You're ill," I muttered. "That's all this is. Fever, lack of sleep." But then something else slipped in. A thought. Quiet, reasonable. It would go faster if there were two of you. I sat up. "Don't be stupid," I said out loud, sharper this time, like I was telling someone else off. But the thought didn't go away. It settled. Sat there, patient. I lasted about 20 minutes. That's all. 20 minutes of pretending I wasn't thinking about it before I stood up, grabbed my coat again, and headed for the door. Even then, I hesitated, my hand on the handle. That same instinct from the night before, pushing back. Stay inside, but it was weaker now, distant, drowned out by something else. Curiosity, maybe, or something that felt like it. I stepped outside. The street had woken up a little. A car idled at the far end. Someone's front door opened and shut. Normal sounds. Ordinary life continuing as if nothing had changed. But Graham's garden, that still felt separate, like a space that didn't quite belong to the rest of Briar Lane anymore. The gate was still open. I didn't knock. I just walked in. Graham didn't seem surprised to see me. If anything, he looked pleased. "Thought you might come back," he said, not stopping his work. I gave a small, awkward smile. Couldn't concentrate, to be honest. He nodded, like that made perfect sense. "It helps," he said, keeping busy. I stepped closer to the edge of the hole, peering down. It was deeper now, much deeper than it should have been in the space of a few hours. The sides were rough, uneven, packed with dark soil that looked almost damp in a way that didn't match the morning air. The bottom was shadowed, the light not quite reaching it properly. "How far are you planning to go?" I asked. Graham shrugged. "As far as it takes." That didn't answer anything. But I didn't press him. Instead, I found myself scanning the garden, looking for, I don't even know what. Something to explain it, something to anchor it back in reality. My eyes landed on the spade leaning against the fence, then on the second one, half buried in the mud nearby. I frowned. Did you have help? Graham glanced up briefly. Not yet. Something about the way he said it made my chest tighten. Before I could think better of it, I stepped over the edge of the hole. The drop wasn't far, just enough that my shoes sank slightly into the soft earth at the bottom. The air down there felt different, cooler, heavier, quieter. I exhaled slowly, surprised by the way my shoulders relaxed. That's strange, I said. Graham didn't respond. He just handed me the second spade. I took it, without thinking. That's the part that bothers me most, even now. There was no moment of decision, no internal debate, just a simple, automatic movement. Hand out, fingers closing around the handle, weight settling comfortably into my grip, like I'd done it 100 times before. Here, he said, nodding toward a patch of earth beside him. Start there. I nodded, and I did. The first strike of the spade into the soil sent a dull vibration up my arms. The earth gave way more easily than I expected, soft and loose, almost like it had already been turned. I dug again, and again, and again. After a while, the rhythm took over. Scrape, lift, turn, drop. It was simple. That's the only word for it. Simple in a way nothing else had felt in a long time. No overthinking, no worry, no replaying conversations in my head or stressing about things that hadn't happened yet. Just the motion, just the task. I lost track of time. I must have, because the next thing I remember clearly is a voice calling down from above. Eleanor, what on earth are you doing? I looked up. Joyce Whitaker stood at the edge of the hole, hands on her hips, her gray hair pulled back into its usual tight bun. She was wearing her running gear, bright and out of place against the muddy garden, and she looked bewildered. I blinked at her. What does it look like? I said, slightly out of breath. She stared at me, then at Graham, then back at me. You're digging a hole, she said slowly, as if saying it out loud might make it make sense. I shrugged. Helping out. Joyce's expression shifted. Not quite concern, not quite annoyance, something in between. Why? She asked. I opened my mouth to answer and realized I didn't have one. I glanced at Graham. He didn't look up and stop, just kept digging. It's just something to do, I said eventually. Joyce frowned. In his garden? It's his garden, I replied, a bit sharper than I meant to. He can do what he likes with it. That's not what I meant, she said, her voice tightening. This is odd, Eleanor. Don't you think? I hesitated. For a fraction of a second, something like doubt flickered. This was odd. This was more than odd. But then I looked down at the earth again, felt the weight of the spade in my hands, heard that steady, grounding rhythm, and the doubt slipped. It's fine, I said. Honestly. Joyce didn't look convinced. She stood there for a moment longer, shifting her weight, clearly debating whether to push further. Then she sighed. Well, don't overdo it, she muttered. You look dreadful, by the way. I huffed a small laugh. Thanks. She turned to leave, paused, then glanced back one more time, at the hole, at us. Something unreadable passed across her face. Then she walked away. I watched her go for a moment, then turned back to the task. Scrape, lift, turn, drop. After a while, I heard footsteps again. Another voice, then another. By midday, there were 4 of us. By afternoon, there were more, and no one could quite explain why they had joined. But none of us stopped. By late afternoon, it stopped feeling like Graham's garden. That's the only way I can explain it. At some point, no clear moment, no obvious shift, the space changed from his to ours. People weren't just stopping to ask questions anymore. They were stepping through the gate without knocking, rolling up sleeves, picking up tools like they'd always intended to. I remember climbing out of the hole for the first time since morning. My legs trembled when I stood upright, like I'd forgotten how to use them properly. My back ached, my throat burned, and there was dried mud on my hands, my coat, even my face, where I must have wiped sweat without realizing. But despite all that, I didn't feel tired. Not really. If anything, I felt clearer, sharper, like something that had been buzzing constantly in my head had finally gone quiet. I stood there, blinking in the dull gray light, and realized there were more people in the garden than I remembered. Martin Hargreaves was there, sleeves rolled up, digging at the far edge with a kind of quiet determination I'd only ever seen when he was fixing his car. Joyce had come back too, though she stayed at the edge at first, arms folded, watching with that tight, disapproving expression. But even she didn't stay out of it long. You're doing it wrong, she said eventually, stepping closer. You'll collapse the sides like that. Graham looked up at her. For a second, I thought he might argue, but instead he just handed her a spade, and she took it. That was all it took. No big speech, no convincing, just a small correction, and then she was in the hole with the rest of us. By early evening, someone had brought out floodlights. I don't remember who. They just appeared, plugged into an extension lead trailing out from one of the houses, casting everything in that same harsh, like artificial glow that flattened shadows and made the hole look deeper than it should have been. The light drew attention. People walking past slowed down. Some laughed, some shook their heads. But more and more of them stopped, and after a few minutes, they stayed. I heard snippets of conversation above us as I worked. What's all this then? Digging, apparently. For what? Dunno. A pause. Then almost always, got a spare shovel? It should have felt strange. It should have felt wrong. But it didn't. It felt natural, like something the street had been waiting to do. Someone brought flasks, tea, coffee. Someone else turned up with sandwiches wrapped in cling film, passing them around like it was a garden party. There was even a radio at one point, playing quietly from the patio table, though I couldn't tell you what station. It blended into the background, another layer of noise that didn't quite reach us down in the hole. Because that was the strangest part. The deeper we dug, the quieter it became. Not silent, never silent, but the sounds above, voices, footsteps, laughter, they felt distant, like they were happening in another place entirely. Down there it was just us, and the earth, and that steady grounding rhythm, scrape, turn, drop. At some point I noticed the soil had changed. It wasn't the same as before. The top layer had been typical garden stuff, loose, a bit rocky, mixed with roots and bits of rubbish you always find buried in old plots. But now it was darker, damp in a way that didn't match the weather, almost soft, like it had been disturbed before. I ran my fingers through it once, just out of curiosity. It clung to my skin, not sticky, not wet, just reluctant to let go. You feel that? I asked, glancing at Martin. He nodded without stopping. Yeah. What is it? Don't know, he said. Easier to dig, though. He was right. It was easier. The spade cut through it like it wasn't really there. We were making progress faster than we should have been. That thought flickered in my mind briefly, then disappeared. Above us, the sky began to darken. The floodlights grew harsher as the natural light faded, turning everything outside their reach into deep, creeping shadow. Someone lit a cigarette near the edge, the glow of it bobbing faintly as they moved. Someone else laughed at something I didn't hear. It felt almost normal, like one of those strange, spontaneous things communities do sometimes. A bit of collective effort, a shared project, the sort of thing people would talk about later with a smile. Remember when we all dug that massive hole in Graham's garden? Except no one was talking about later. No one was asking when we'd stop. Not even Graham. I climbed out again at some point, more out of habit than necessity, and stood near the edge, looking down. The hole was wrong. There's no better word for it. It was too wide, too deep, not in a dramatic, impossible way, just subtly off, like your eyes couldn't quite judge the distance properly. I tried to count the people inside, lost track. There were too many, more than had arrived. That didn't make sense. I frowned, rubbing at my eyes. Bit much, isn't it? I turned. A man I didn't recognize stood beside me at the edge of the garden, mid-30s maybe. Dark jacket, hood up. He looked out of place, not one of the usual faces from the street. Sorry, I said. The hole, he replied, nodding toward it. You lot been at it all day? Yeah, I said slowly. He stared down into it, for longer than felt comfortable. Then he took a step back. Something's not right there, he said quietly. A small ripple of irritation went through me. It's just a hole, I replied. He shook his head. No, it's not. I opened my mouth to argue, but he was already backing away, his expression tightening, eyes flicking between the hole and the people inside it. I'd leave it, he muttered, if I were you. Then he turned and walked off, quickly. I watched him go, a strange unease settling in my chest. For a moment, just a moment, the spell of it cracked, the normality, the rhythm, all of it. And I saw it, really saw it. The number of people, the depth of the hole, the way Graham stood at the center of it, digging steadily, like everything else revolved around him. My stomach tightened. This is mad, I whispered. Then, from below, Eleanor. I looked down. Graham was watching me, his face calm, expectant. "You coming back down?" I hesitated. The unease still there, still real, but weaker now, fading, like it was being pushed aside by something heavier, something that didn't care whether it made sense or not. I nodded. "Yeah," I said, already stepping toward the edge. Just needed a breather. And as I dropped back into the hole, the feeling returned. That quiet, that clarity, that sense that everything, for once, was exactly where it was supposed to be. Above us, the last of the daylight disappeared. The floodlights hummed. Someone handed out more tea. And it happened just after dark. Not all at once. Not with some dramatic crack or collapse like you'd expect. If anything, that's what made it worse. We didn't notice it at first. We were too busy. That's the thing about the digging. It kept you occupied, focused. The rhythm of it filled your head so completely that everything else became background noise. Time slipped. Conversations blurred. Even the code stopped registering properly. Scrape, lift, turn, drop. At some point, someone above passed down bottles of water. Someone else laughed about how we'd need a ladder soon if we kept going like this. It all felt ordinary. Until Callum Reed slipped. He was younger than the rest of us. Early 20s maybe. Lived 2 doors down from me. Quiet lad, always had headphones on. Barely said a word to anyone unless he had to. I don't even remember seeing him arrive, but he was there, working away near one of the deeper edges. His movements quick, almost frantic. I heard the shout before I saw it. "Oi, watch it!" Then a dull sudden shift. Not loud, just wrong. The ground beneath Callum gave way. It didn't crumble like loose soil should. It folded, like something underneath had opened its mouth. 1 second he was there, mid-swing with the spade. The next he dropped, not straight down. He tilted, his body twisting as the earth beneath him slanted and sank, his arms flailing as he tried to grab hold of something, anything. "Help!" His voice cut off as he slid further. I lunged forward without thinking, grabbing for his jacket. For a split second, I caught him. Our hands locked. His grip was tight. Desperate, his eyes. God, his eyes. They weren't looking at me. They were looking past me. Down. "Can you hear that?" he said, breathless, panicked. "She's down there." "What?" I snapped, tightening my grip. "Callum, hold on." "My mum," he said, his voice breaking. "She's calling me. She's..." The ground shifted again. Something below him moved. I felt it, not through my hands, through the air. A change, a pressure. Like the space beneath us had suddenly become deeper than it should have been. Callum's body jerked, hard, like something had pulled him from below. I tightened my grip, digging my heels into the dirt, shouting for help. "Grab him! Someone grab him!" Hands reached in. Martin, Joyce, someone else. We had him. For a moment, we had him. Then something pale flashed beneath the surface. Not clearly, not fully, just a glimpse. Long, jointed, wrong. Callum screamed, not in pain, not at first, in recognition. "Don't!" he gasped. "Don't take me!" And then he was gone. Ripped from our grip so suddenly it sent all of us stumbling backwards. The ground collapsed inward with a soft, sucking sound, soil sliding down into the opening where he'd been. For a second, no one moved, no one spoke. We just stared at the hole, at the place where Callum had been, at the darkness that had taken him. The sound came next, not from above, not from around us, from below, a low, wet shifting, followed by something else. A voice, faint, distorted. "Mum." I froze. Joyce grabbed my arm. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. I nodded, because I had, but it didn't sound like Callum anymore. It sounded further away, and wrong. The hole had changed. That's when we all saw it, really saw it. The bottom wasn't there anymore, not properly. The soil we'd been digging through had given way to something else, a darker space beneath it. The edges uneven, sloping inward where the collapse had happened. It wasn't a clean break. It looked like the earth had thinned and then simply opened. Someone above shouted, "What's going on?" No one answered, because none of us knew. Martin took a cautious step forward, peering over the edge. "Callum?" he called. No response. Just that same low, shifting sound. And then something moved again. Down there, just beyond where the light from the flood lamps reached. I stepped back. My heart was hammering now, fast and uneven, the clarity from earlier gone completely, replaced by something sharp and cold. "This isn't right," Joyce said, her voice trembling slightly. "We need to stop. We need to." Graham climbed out of the hole, slowly, deliberately. He didn't rush, didn't panic. He brushed dirt from his hands, then stepped to the edge and looked down into the opening. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, there you are, he murmured. A chill ran through me. What do you mean? I asked, my voice barely steady. He didn't look at me, just kept staring into the darkness below. I was wondering when you'd show yourself. Joyce tightened her grip on my arm. Graham, she said, sharper now. Someone's just been dragged under the ground. We need to call someone. It's all right, he interrupted, calm, certain. They won't hurt him. I stared at him. What are you talking about? I said. We just saw. They only take what belongs to them, he continued, almost gently. It's part of it. Part of what? Joyce demanded. Graham finally turned to look at us, and for the first time, he didn't look normal. There was something else in his expression now. Something, settled, like he'd been waiting for this moment. For what's underneath, he said. The words hung there, heavy, wrong. Behind him, someone muttered, we should leave. Another voice, call the police. But no one moved. Not properly, because even as the fear started to settle in, something else was still there, holding us. That same pull, that same quiet insistence. I looked down into the hole again, into the darkness where Callum had vanished, and I felt it. Faint but undeniable. That same strange calm from before, that same sense of rightness. I swallowed hard. We can't just leave him, I said. Joyce turned to me, eyes wide. Eleanor. He might still be alive, I added quickly. We don't know what's down there. We don't know. We know enough, she snapped. Something took him. I hesitated, because she was right. Of course she was right. But what if we can get him back, I said. The words came out before I could stop them. Graham's smile widened slightly. Exactly, he said. Joyce stared at me like she didn't recognize me. Have you lost your mind? She asked. Maybe I had. Maybe we all had. But when I looked around at the others, at Martin, at the people gathered at the edge, I saw the same thing in their faces. Fear, yes, but also curiosity. Something had opened beneath our street, something impossible, something that had taken one of us. And instead of running, we were still here, looking down, wanting to understand. Graham stepped aside, gesturing toward the opening. Careful, he said softly. It's a bit of a drop. Joyce shook her head, backing away. No, she said. No, this is wrong. We need to get out of here. But I stepped forward, slowly, carefully. The others followed, one by one, until we stood at the edge of the broken earth, staring down into the dark, and somewhere below, something shifted, waiting. No one said we're going down there, not out loud. That's what I keep thinking about. There was no discussion, no plan, no moment where we all agreed this was the right thing to do. If you'd asked any of us then, properly asked, we probably would have said it was madness. But we didn't ask. We just moved. It started with Martin. He crouched at the edge of the break, leaning forward, testing the slope where the soil had collapsed inward. It wasn't a clean drop anymore. The ground had sunk at an angle, forming a narrow, unstable incline of damp earth and exposed roots leading into the darkness. It's not that far, he said, more to himself than anyone else. Joyce grabbed his arm. Don't. He glanced back at her, and for a second I thought he might listen. Then he pulled free. We can't just leave him, he said, the same words I'd used, that same tone. He slid one foot over the edge. The soil shifted slightly under his weight, but held. He lowered himself carefully, gripping a thick root jutting from the side, testing each step before committing to it. The light from above stretched down after him, but it didn't go far. Just enough to show his shape descending into something that swallowed detail. Martin, Joyce tried again. I'll shout if it's not safe, he called back. That didn't mean anything. We all knew it, but it was enough. He kept going. A few seconds later, he was halfway down, his boots sliding slightly on the damp incline. Then he stopped. Can you see him? I called. There was a pause, and then, no, not panicked, not yet, just uncertain. There's something else, he added. A cold prickle spread across my skin. What do you mean, something else? He didn't answer straight away. I could hear him shifting, adjusting his footing, maybe crouching to look closer. Then, it opens out, he said. That didn't make sense. It's a cavity, he continued, his voice quieter now. Like a hollow space under the ground. Joyce shook her head. No, that's not possible. The ground doesn't just... It does here, Martin cut in. Another pause. Then he looked up. I could just make out his face in the dim light, pale and damp, his expression caught somewhere between curiosity and unease. I'm going further, he said. Don't you dare, Joyce snapped. But he was already moving again, lower, deeper, until the light barely touched him at all. And then he stepped out of sight, just like that, gone. A ripple of movement passed through the group above, people shifting, whispering. Someone swore under their breath. And then, without warning, Graham moved. He didn't hesitate, didn't test the ground. He simply stepped onto the slope and began descending. His movement steady, practiced, like he'd always known this was coming. I watched him go, my pulse hammering in my ears. "Graham, wait," I started. He didn't respond. He just kept going. And something inside me leaned forward with him. That same pull again. Stronger now, less like a suggestion, more like an expectation. "You're coming too." I swallowed hard. "This is insane," Joy said beside me, her voice tight. "We should not be doing this. We should be calling someone, getting proper help." "They won't believe us," someone muttered from behind. "They don't need to believe us," she shot back. "They just need to get here." "And say what?" Another voice cut in. "That there's a hole in the ground that swallowed a bloke?" Silence followed that, because that was exactly what we'd be saying, and it sounded ridiculous even now, especially now. I looked down into the darkness again, into the place where Martin had vanished, where Callum had been taken, and I felt it, that strange quiet certainty, like there was something down there waiting to be understood, waiting for us. "I'm going," I said. Joyce turned to me sharply. "Eleanor, no. I can't just stand here," I replied. "That's exactly what you should be doing." "Why?" I snapped, more sharply than I intended. "Because it's safer? Because it makes sense? When has any of this made sense?" She stared at me, stunned, and I realized I didn't sound like myself, but I didn't stop. "What if he's alive?" I added, softer now. "What if he needs help?" Joyce hesitated. I saw it, the doubt, the crack. Because underneath everything else, we were still people who lived on the same street, people who nodded at each other, who borrowed sugar, who looked out for one another in small, quiet ways. Leaving someone down there, that didn't sit right. Not for any of us. "I'll be right behind you," I said. That was a lie. I didn't know what I'd do once I was down there. I didn't know anything, but I stepped forward anyway. The edge felt different under my feet, softer, unstable. The soil shifted as I placed my weight on it, sliding slightly before settling. I gripped one of the exposed roots, testing it. It held. "Careful," someone murmured behind me. I nodded, even though they couldn't see me properly anymore. Then I began to descend. The first few steps were awkward, unsteady. My shoes slipping slightly on the damp earth, my fingers digging into roots and small ledges for balance. The light from above followed me for a short distance, stretching long shadows along the uneven walls. But with each step, it dimmed. The sounds from above faded too. Voices became muffled, distant, like they were being swallowed along with the light. By the time I reached the bottom of the slope, the world above felt far away, not gone, but removed. Looking back up, the opening was still there, a jagged circle of light framed by the silhouettes of people peering down. But it looked smaller than it should have, further, like I'd come down much deeper than the drop had suggested. "That's not right," I whispered. "What isn't?" Martin's voice came from the dark. I turned sharply. He stood a few feet away, half lit by the weak spill of light from above, his face pale, his eyes wide, but not quite focused. "You all right?" he asked. I nodded slowly. "Yeah, just the distance, it doesn't feel." "Yeah," he said quickly. "I know what you mean." He glanced around. "You seeing this?" I followed his gaze. And my breath caught. It wasn't just a hollow, not just a cavity. It was space. A wide, open stretch beneath the ground. The walls of the collapsed shaft give the light wasn't coming from one place. That was the first thing I realized as we got closer. At a distance, it looked like a single glow, soft, flickering, almost comforting in the dark. But as we moved toward it, shapes began to separate from it. Points, edges, lines, multiple lights, set at regular intervals, like street lamps. I slowed without meaning to. "Do you see that?" I whispered. No one answered. They didn't need to. We all saw it. The ground leveled out beneath our feet as we approached, the uneven earth giving way to something flatter, packed, almost smoothed, like it had been walked over for years. And then the darkness opened. There's no better word for it. It didn't fade. It didn't thin. It parted, revealing something that should not have been there. A street. Not just any street. Our street, but not quite. The layout was wrong in small, unsettling ways. The spacing between houses too wide in places, too narrow in others. The angles slightly off, as if someone had tried to rebuild Briar Lane from memory and got the proportions just a bit wrong. The houses themselves, they were older, not in a charming, preserved way, in a worn way. The brick was darker, stained with something that caught the low light in dull streaks. Windows were either boarded or open, their frames crooked, glass missing or clouded. Doors hung slightly ajar, each one marked with scratches, deep, deliberate grooves carved into the wood. And above each door, a name. I didn't notice it at first. Not properly. It was Martin who said it. Why is my name on that? We all turned. He was staring at one of the houses near the edge of the street. I followed his gaze and felt my stomach drop. There, scratched crudely into the door, M. Hargreaves. The letters weren't neat. They were jagged, uneven, like they'd been carved in a hurry or with shaking hands. "That's not funny," Martin said, his voice tight. "Who did that?" No one answered, because we were all looking now, really looking. Every door, every single one. Names, different names, familiar names. People from the street. Joy stepped forward, her breathing quickening. "No," she whispered. "No, this is some kind of joke." She stopped, her eyes locked on one of the doors. I followed them. J. Whitaker. She shook her head, backing away slightly. "No, I don't like this. I don't like this at all." I turned slowly, my gaze moving across the row of houses, searching, dreading, and then I saw it, halfway down the street, a door slightly ajar. The wood warped, the hinges dark with something that looked like rust and scratched across the center. E. Price. My breath caught. "No," I said under my breath, but it was there, clear as anything, my name, on a door that should not exist. "Graham," Joyce said sharply, turning to him. "What is this? What have you done?" But Graham wasn't looking at the doors. He was looking further down the street, toward the center, where the lights were stronger, where something else stood. "We're nearly there," he said. My skin prickled. "Nearly where?" I asked. He didn't answer. He just kept walking, straight down the middle of the street, past the houses, past the doors, past the names. Like none of it surprised him, like he'd been here before. The rest of us hesitated, only for a moment, because even as fear began to take hold, something else was still there. That same pull, that same quiet insistence. I glanced back at the opening we'd come through. It was still there, I think, but it looked further away, smaller, like it had receded. "Eleanor," Joyce said, her voice low and strained, "we need to go back." I wanted to agree, I really did. Every part of me that still felt like me was screaming the same thing. This is wrong. This is impossible. Leave, now. But my feet didn't move, because my eyes were still on that door, on my name, on the fact that it was already open, just slightly. Enough to suggest something inside had either left or was waiting. "What if there's something in there?" I said quietly. Joyce stared at me. "That's exactly why we shouldn't." "We don't know that." I cut in, though my voice wavered. "We don't know anything about this place. What if that's where Callum is? What if he came through one of these?" "That's a guess," she snapped. "A bad one." But she didn't move away. Not really. None of us did. Because curiosity had rooted us in place, that same terrible curiosity, the kind that doesn't care about consequences, the kind that only wants to know. Martin stepped toward his door. "I'm just going to have a look," he said. "Don't," Joyce warned. He hesitated, then reached out. His hand hovered over the wood for a second, then pushed. The door creaked open, slow, loud in the silence. We all leaned in slightly, straining to see inside, but the darkness within was thick, too thick, like it swallowed the light from the street lamps before it could reach anything meaningful. "Can you see anything?" I asked. Martin shook his head. "No, it's just..." He stopped, his head tilted slightly. "What?" Joyce pressed. He didn't answer. He took a step forward, inside. "Martin," I said, sharper now, "come back." Still no response. He stood just past the threshold now, his back to us, his posture slack, like he'd gone still in a way that wasn't natural. "Martin," Joyce said again, louder. He moved, but not back toward us. Further in, another step, and then he was gone. Not dramatically, not violently. He just wasn't there anymore. The space he'd occupied swallowed him whole. "No," Joyce said, her voice breaking slightly. "No, no, no, Martin." She rushed forward, stopping just short of the doorway. "Martin, this isn't funny. Come back out." Silence, thick, pressing. Then a sound from inside, faint, like something shifting in a distant room. And beneath it, a voice. Not quite Martin's, but close enough. It's all right, Joyce staggered back. That's not him, she whispered. That's not him. I felt my chest tighten because she was right. It sounded like him, but it didn't feel. I didn't go into the house. That's what I tell myself. I stood there, staring at the gap in the door, listening to that faint, familiar whisper curling out of the dark, and I did not step forward. But I didn't move away either. That might have been worse, because once you stay even for a moment, it's like the place knows you've chosen it, even if you haven't admitted it to yourself yet. Eleanor. Joyce's voice snapped me back. I blinked, my eyes stinging slightly, like I'd been staring too long without realizing. What? I said a bit too quickly. Don't, she said, her tone firm, almost pleading now. Whatever you think you hear, don't listen to it. I swallowed. Did you hear it too? I asked quietly. She hesitated. That was all the answer I needed. Yes, she admitted, but it's not real. I nodded. Right, I said. But even as I said it, the sound came again. Faint, barely there, but closer this time. Eleanor, my name. Spoken the way my mother used to say it when I was younger. Not sharp, not annoyed, just soft. Familiar. Impossible. My mom had been dead for 8 years. I stepped back, just one step. It felt like pulling away from something warm on a cold day, reluctant, wrong. Joyce grabbed my arm. Come on, she said. We're not staying here. Behind us, more doors creaked. Not all at once, one at a time. A slow, staggered sequence of sound that traveled down the street, like something breathing. I turned, watched, as another door eased open, then another, and another, each one revealing that same thick, swallowing darkness inside. The names scratched into the wood seemed deeper now, darker, like they'd been carved more recently, or like they were being carved still. A man near the edge of the group, Darren, I think his name was, lived a few houses down, stepped toward one of the newly opened doors. Darren, don't, someone called. He didn't respond. His head tilted slightly, like he was listening to something the rest of us couldn't quite hear. Then he smiled, not wide, not manic, just relieved. They're inside, he said softly. Who? Joyce demanded. My girls, he replied, his voice trembling slightly. They're calling me. There, his voice broke. He stepped forward. No, Joyce snapped, moving toward him. That's not. Too late. He crossed the threshold, and like Martin, he didn't disappear in a flash. He just went further than he should have been able to. One step, two, gone. The darkness closed around him like water. Silence followed. For a few seconds, no one spoke, no one moved. Then the voices came again. More of them this time. Not loud, not overwhelming, but layered. Whispers overlapping whispers, different tones, different cadences, each one familiar to someone. I could see it happening, the recognition, the way people's expressions shifted as they heard something meant for them. A woman near the back of the group covered her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. That's my dad, she whispered. He died last year. Don't, Joyce said sharply. It's not him. None of this is. But the woman was already moving, slow, drawn. No, Joyce tried again, reaching out, but the woman slipped past her, toward one of the doors, her door. She didn't even hesitate. She stepped inside and vanished, just like the others. I felt my chest tighten. This wasn't just fear anymore. This was something else, something deeper. Because the voices, they weren't random. They knew us. They knew what to say. I turned slowly, scanning the row of houses again. Every door, every name, every dark opening, waiting. Eleanor. There it was again, closer now, clearer. I squeezed my eyes shut. No, I whispered. No, you're not real. But it didn't stop. Eleanor, it's all right. My breath hitched. The tone was wrong. Too gentle, too perfect, like a memory that had been polished smooth. Joyce's grip tightened on my arm. You're hearing it again, she said. I nodded. Yeah. Good, she replied. I blinked. Good? It means you're still thinking, she said. The moment it stops feeling wrong, that's when you need to worry. That didn't help. Not really. But it grounded me just enough to stay where I was. Around us, the group was thinning. People slipping away one by one, each drawn toward a different door, each convinced they were about to find something they'd lost, something they needed, something they couldn't let go of. This place, I said quietly, it's not just showing us things, it's offering them. Joyce nodded grimly, and taking something in return. I didn't want to ask what. I had a feeling I already knew. Further down the street, Graham had reached the center. He stood beneath one of the taller lampposts, its light flickering weakly above him. He hadn't gone into any of the houses, hadn't even looked at them. He just stood there, waiting. Why isn't he going in? I asked. Joyce followed my gaze. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Because whatever he's looking for, it's not in there. A chill ran through me. What does that mean? I don't know, she admitted. But I don't like it. Neither did I. Because if the houses were taking people and Graham wasn't interested, then whatever he was interested in had to be worse. Behind us, another door slammed shut. Loud. Sudden. We both flinched. I turned. The door with M, Hargreaves carved into it. Closed. Tight. No gap. No light. No sound. Martin, I whispered. Joyce shook her head. He's gone. The finality in her voice hit harder than anything else, because deep down, I knew she was right. The street felt emptier now, not physically. There were still people around us, but something had changed. The air felt heavier, thicker, like the place was settling. Satisfied, I looked back at my door, still open, still waiting, and for a moment, we should have turned back then. That was the last moment, the moment where leaving still felt possible. The path behind us, the sloping tunnel, the faint circle of light far above, it was still there, still real, still reachable. But we didn't go. Because Graham was standing in the center of the street, and something about him, something in the way he didn't even acknowledge the houses, the doors, the voices, told us this wasn't the end of it. This wasn't even the worst part. Stay close, Joyce muttered, her grip tightening slightly on my sleeve. I nodded. We moved forward together, step by step, past the doors, past the names, past the places where people had vanished. The further we walked, the quieter the street became. The whispers behind us faded, not gone entirely, but dulled, like they were receding into something deeper. The air shifted again, colder now, with a faint metallic taste that settled at the back of my throat. And then we reached it. The center. It wasn't a square in the usual sense, not paved or open like you'd expect. It was more like a clearing, an unnatural gap between the buildings, where the ground dipped slightly and the earth had been worn smooth by something that had passed over it again and again. At the very middle stood a tower, or what I thought was a tower, tall, narrow, rising up into the dark above like a spine. It wasn't made of brick or stone, not properly. Up close, I realized the surface was uneven, layered, ridged in a way that didn't match anything man-made. And then I saw why. Those are bones, Joyce whispered. She was right. Not clean, white bones. Something older, darkened, fused together into a structure that had no business holding its shape. A bell hung at the top. If you could call it a bell, it didn't look like one. Too long, too thin. Its surface stretched and warped, like it had been pulled into shape rather than forged. And it was moving, slowly, swaying without wind. No, I murmured. No, that's not. It rang. The sound wasn't loud, not at first, but it was wrong. That's the only word for it. It didn't echo the way sound should. It didn't spread outward. It went through us, like something passing directly through the body instead of the air. My knees buckled. I dropped to one hand, the other clutching my chest as the sound settled somewhere deep inside me. Joyce gasped beside me. What is that? The bell rang again. Louder this time. Or maybe just closer. I couldn't tell. The world seemed to tilt slightly, like the ground beneath us had shifted without moving. Around us, people began to collapse. Not all at once, one by one. A man near the edge dropped to his knees, his spade slipping from his hands. A woman further back swayed, then sank slowly to the ground, her eyes wide and unfocused. Get up, Joyce shouted. Get up, all of you. But they didn't respond, because they weren't unconscious. That would have been easy. They were still, frozen, eyes open, breathing shallow, like they were caught somewhere between waking and dreaming. What's happening to them? I whispered. Graham stepped forward, calm, unaffected. They're listening, he said. To what? I demanded, my voice cracking slightly. He didn't answer. He didn't need to, because I felt it too, beneath the ringing, beneath the pressure in my chest. Something else was there, a rhythm. Not sound, not exactly, more like a pattern, something repeating, something trying to align. My thoughts slowed, not stopped, just dulled, edges softening, like everything was being smoothed down into something easier to manage. No, Joyce said sharply, grabbing my face and forcing me to look at her. Stay with me, don't let it. The bell rang again, closer, stronger. Her grip loosened. Her expression faltered, and for a second, just a second, she looked peaceful. Then something moved. Not the bell, not the tower, something on the ground, at the edges of the clearing. I turned my head slowly and saw them. They weren't there before. I'm sure of that, because I would have noticed. Tall, thin, their bodies stretched in unnatural proportions, limbs too long, joints bending in ways that didn't match anything human. Their skin, if it was skin, looked stretched tight, pale in some places, dark in others, like it had been stitched together from mismatched pieces. But it wasn't their bodies that made my stomach drop. It was their shadows. Each one cast a long, thin shadow across the ground, but the shadows didn't match. They moved differently, lagging slightly behind, twitching when the bodies were still. "No," I whispered. "No, that's not." One of them stepped forward. Its movement was slow, deliberate, its head tilted slightly as if studying us. Then it reached down, toward one of the people on the ground. A man I didn't recognize, still kneeling, still staring ahead. The creature's hand, if that's what it was, brushed the ground beside him, and the shadow beneath him lifted. Not detached, not fully, but raised, like something being peeled from a surface. The man didn't react, didn't scream, didn't even blink. His shadow stretched upward, drawn toward the creature's hand, thinning as it rose. "Joyce," I said, my voice shaking. "Joyce, look." She turned and froze. Oh my God. The creature worked slowly, carefully, like it was handling something delicate. It drew the shadow further, pulling it away from the man's body in long, thin strands, each one stretching impossibly before snapping free with a soft, almost inaudible sound. The man swayed, just slightly, then went still. Not frozen this time, empty. The creature pressed the shadow into the ground beside it, and it stuck, flattening against the earth, merging with it, gone. "What are they doing?" Joyce whispered. Graham answered. "They're taking what's left behind." "That's not an answer," I snapped. "What is that?" He glanced at me and smiled. "The part of us that stays," he said. The bell rang again, louder, closer. More people dropped. More of those things stepped forward, working, one by one, pulling shadows, stitching them into the ground. The air filled with a faint, wet sound, like something being peeled slowly from a surface, and beneath it, the soft, distant echo of voices, not from the houses, not from behind us, from the ground. I felt my body sway, the pressure building again, the pull, stronger now, more insistent. "Let go." I staggered. Joyce caught me. "Don't," she said, her voice strained. "Don't you dare." "I can hear it," I whispered. "I can." "Ignore it." The bell rang, and for a moment, everything stopped. The creatures, the shadows, the sound, all of it, frozen. Then they all turned, at once, toward us, and I realized something that made my blood run cold. They hadn't been ignoring us. They'd just been waiting. For a second, just one, the whole place held its breath. The bell stopped. The creatures froze. Even the faint whispering under the ground went quiet. And all of it, all of it, all of it, turned toward us. Not rushed, not aggressive, just aware, like we had finally stepped into the part of the room we weren't meant to enter. I felt Joyce's grip tighten hard enough to hurt. "Don't move," she whispered. I didn't think I could if I tried. Every instinct I had was screaming to run, but my body wouldn't listen. My legs felt heavy, rooted in place, like the ground beneath us had decided we belonged there now. One of the creatures took a step forward. Its movement was wrong in a way that made my stomach turn. Not jerky, not unnatural in speed, but too smooth. Like it wasn't bound by the same rules as everything else. Its limbs stretched and adjusted as it moved, the joints bending slightly differently each time, as if it was figuring out how to walk with every step. Its shadow dragged behind it, delayed, twitching, then snapping forward to catch up. "No," Joyce breathed. "No, no, no." Graham stepped ahead of us, just a pace. But it was enough. The creature stopped, its head tilted, studying him. There was no fear in Graham. None. His posture was relaxed, his breathing steady, his face calm in a way that felt completely disconnected from everything happening around us. "They won't hurt you," he said. His voice was soft, certain. I stared at him. "How can you possibly know that?" I hissed. He didn't look at me. "They're not here for that," he said. The creature took another step, closer. Now I could see its face, or what should have been its face. There were features, sort of, impressions where eyes might have been. A stretch where a mouth could form, but nothing fixed, nothing stable. The surface shifted slightly, like something beneath it was trying to decide what shape to take. It leaned forward, not toward Graham, toward us, toward me. I felt something cold slide through my chest. Not physical, something else, like it was reaching into me rather than toward me. No, Joyce said sharply, stepping in front of me. You're not taking anything else. The creature paused, then tilted its head again, and for a moment, just a moment, the shape of its face changed. Not fully, but enough. I saw something familiar there, a resemblance, a suggestion, not of someone I knew directly, but of a person, someone it thought I might recognize. I recoiled. Don't look at it, Joyce said quickly. That's how It's not trying to hurt us, Graham said again, more firmly now. Joyce snapped around to him. Martin's gone, she said. Darren's gone. Half the street is gone, and you're standing there telling me this isn't dangerous? They're not gone, he replied. They are gone. They've just stopped carrying it, he said. Joyce stared at him like he'd lost his mind. What does that even mean? She demanded. Graham finally turned, really turned, and there was something different in his eyes now. Not madness, not grief, conviction. The weight, he said quietly, the things they lost, the things they never said, the things they regret. He gestured vaguely toward the houses behind us. That's what the doors are for. And what about those? Joyce snapped, pointing at the creatures. Graham glanced at them briefly. They take what's left. That's not comforting, I said, my voice unsteady. It's not meant to be, he replied. The creature shifted again, closer now. I could feel it more strongly, that cold presence, that pressure, like it was brushing against something inside me, testing it, measuring it. I staggered slightly. Joyce caught me again. Eleanor, stay with me, she said. Don't let it. But her voice sounded distant now, muffled, like it was coming from further away than it should have, because something else was louder, inside my head, not a voice, not words, just a feeling, a pull, not downward, not forward, inward. Let go. My chest tightened. I can't, I whispered. I can feel it. Fight it, Joyce said, her tone sharp and desperate now. Whatever it is, you fight it. Why? Another voice cut in. We both turned. Linus, I hadn't even noticed him move. He stood a few steps behind us, his face pale but lit. That's the only word for it. There was a brightness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Something feverish, excited. Why fight it? He repeated. Because it's killing people. Joyce snapped. It's not killing them, he said, shaking his head slowly. It's freeing them. That's not freedom. You don't know that, Linus replied, his voice rising slightly. None of us do. He stepped forward, closer to the creature. Joyce moved instinctively to block him. Don't you dare, she said, but he didn't stop. You felt it, he said, looking at me now. Didn't you? I hesitated. That was enough. I can see it on your face, he continued. That quiet, that clarity, you don't get that up there. Not really. He gestured vaguely upward. Up there, it's all noise, all pressure, all expectations. Down here, he spread his arms slightly, smiling in a way that made my stomach twist. It makes sense. No, it doesn't, I said, but my voice lacked conviction. It does, he insisted. You just have to stop fighting it. Joyce shook her head, backing slightly toward me again. He's gone, she muttered. He's already gone. I'm not gone, Linus snapped. I'm seeing things I don't remember deciding to go in. That's the truth. One moment I was standing there between Joyce and Linus, caught in that awful stillness where everything feels like it's waiting for you to choose. And the next I was moving. Not forward, not toward Graham, back, toward the houses, toward my house. Eleanor, Joyce called after me, but her voice felt distant, thin, like it was being stretched too far to reach me properly. I just need to check, I said, though I'm not sure I even spoke out loud, because it didn't feel like I was explaining it to her. It felt like I was explaining it to myself, just to prove it's nothing, just to see, just to know. The door was still open, exactly as I'd left it, that narrow gap, that line of darkness cutting into the warped wood. But now, it didn't look empty anymore. It looked full, not with anything I could see, but with something I could feel. A pressure, a presence, waiting. My heart was pounding hard now, louder than the bell had been, louder than the voices. This felt different, more personal, more direct. Don't, Joyce said again, closer this time. I could feel her behind me now, but I didn't turn, because if I did, if I broke that line of sight, I wasn't sure I'd be able to face it again. It's not real, I said, though my voice trembled. It doesn't matter if it is or not, she replied. It's not safe. I reached out. My fingers hovered over the door. The wood looked wrong up close, the grain too deep, the scratches that formed my name still fresh like they'd been carved moments ago. I could almost feel the grooves without touching them. Eleanor. That voice again. Soft, familiar, but not my mother this time. Not quite. It was closer, more accurate, more me. And that's what made it worse. Because it didn't sound like someone pretending. It sounded like something that understood. I just need to see, I whispered. Joyce grabbed my arm, hard. You don't need to see anything, she said. That's how it gets you. I pulled free. Not roughly, just enough. Because something inside me had already leaned forward, already crossed the line. It's just a room, I said. It's not, she snapped. But I was already moving. The door creaked as I pushed it open, slow, loud. The sound echoed strangely, not outward into the street, but inward, like it was being swallowed by whatever waited beyond. The darkness inside didn't retreat, it thickened, just for a second. Then it gave way, not fully, but enough for me to step through. Eleanor, Joyce shouted. I didn't look back, because the moment I crossed the threshold, everything changed. The air was different, warmer. Still, the smell hit me first, not damp earth, not rot, something familiar, laundry detergent, old carpet, dust. I blinked and the darkness shifted, not faded, rearranged, shapes forming where there had been none, like lines, edges, familiar ones. My front room, not perfectly, not cleanly, but recognizably. The sofa was there, the small table with the chipped corner, the telly, even the mug I'd left that morning. Cold tea still sitting in it. No, I breathed. Behind me, the doorway was gone, not closed, not hidden, just not there. The wall where it should have been was solid, continuous, like it had never existed. I turned slowly, taking it in. Everything was slightly off, not dramatically, just enough. The proportions were wrong, the angles too sharp or too shallow, the colors dulled like they'd been drained of something essential. But it was still my house. How was this possible? I whispered. No answer, just silence, thick, waiting. I took a step forward. The floor creaked beneath me, that same familiar sound, that same small shift in the boards, but it echoed too long, too deep, like the space beneath it was larger than it should have been. Hello? I called. My voice didn't travel properly. It didn't fill the room. It just hung there, close, heavy. Then, movement. In the hallway, I froze. There, just beyond the doorway, something shifted. A shape, a person, stepping into view. It was me, or something wearing me. Same height, same build, same clothes, but cleaner, brighter, whole. She smiled, softly, gently, like she'd been expecting me. I was wondering when you'd come in, she said. My voice, Lee. I stared at her, unable to speak, unable to move. You look tired, she continued, tilting her head slightly. You always look tired. I swallowed. What is this? She stepped closer, slow, calm. This is where it stops, she said. What stops? She smiled again. Everything. That word landed heavier than anything else. I shook my head. No, I said. That's not. This isn't real. Does it matter? She asked. That question hit harder than it should have, because I didn't have an answer. She gestured around us. Look at it, she said. No noise, no expectations, no one needing anything from you, no one leaving. My chest tightened. That's not. You don't have to be alone here, she continued. I flinched. I'm not alone, I said quickly. A lie. We both knew it. Her smile softened. You are, she said, and there was no cruelty in it, no malice, just truth, the kind you don't want to hear because you know it's real. You don't have to be, she added. I felt something pull at me then, not physically, emotionally. A weight I hadn't realized I was carrying shifting slightly, lightening. You can stay, she said. Stay? Here, she replied. Where nothing leaves, where nothing changes unless you want it to. I looked around again, at the room, at the stillness, at the absence of everything that had ever made me feel small, ignored, replaceable. It was tempting. God, it was tempting. I wouldn't have to go back? I asked quietly. She shook her head. No more nights, no more empty rooms, no more watching people disappear. My throat tightened. And the others? They made their choice, she said simply. And Graham? Her expression flickered, just slightly, something colder passing through it. He brought you here, she said. That's all that matters. That didn't feel right, but it was easy to ignore. Because the quiet here, it was perfect, too perfect. I took another step forward, closer to her, closer to stay in. Something broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a small crack in the surface, a thought, sharp, unwelcome. If nothing leaves, I frowned. What happens to the things that come in, I asked. Her smile didn't falter. They become part of it, she said. A chill ran through me. Part of what? She stepped closer again, close enough now that I could see the details of her face. Too perfect, too smooth, no flaws, no fatigue, no life. The walls didn't just close in, they shifted. That's what I need you to understand. It wasn't like the room was shrinking. It was worse than that. It was like the space itself was rearranging, folding inward, tightening around me in a way that didn't follow any rules I recognized. The corners bent, the ceiling dipped, and the thing that looked like me, it didn't move. It didn't need to, because everything else was moving for it. "You don't have to fight this," it said, its voice still calm, still wearing my tone like a borrowed coat. "It only feels wrong because you're resisting." "I should be resisting," I snapped, backing toward where the door had been. But there was no door, just wall, solid, unbroken. And the more I stared at it, the more it looked like it had always been that way. "No," I muttered. "No, I came in through." "You came in because you wanted to," it replied gently. That wasn't entirely false, and that made it worse, because the more I tried to hold on to what was real, the more it blurred at the edges. The memory of the street, of Joyce, of the hole, they felt distant now, like something I'd imagined rather than lived through. That was how it worked, not by force, by replacement. "You're tired," it said again. "You've been tired for a long time." The room tightened another inch. I could feel it now, pressure against my chest like the air itself was becoming heavier. "You can rest here," it continued. "No one will expect anything from you." That word again, expect. It hit something deep, something uncomfortable, because it was true. Work, people, conversations, even the small things, keeping up appearances, pretend to be fine when you're not. It all builds up. It wears you down. And for a moment, I wanted it. That stillness, that silence, that absence of everything that made me feel seen in the wrong ways. I closed my eyes, took a breath, and nearly stayed. But then, a sound. Faint, distant. "Eleanor," Joyce, her voice, real, sharp, cutting through everything else. My eyes snapped open, the room faltered, not completely, but enough. The thing in front of me tilted its head. "You're still listening to her," it said. "Yeah," I replied, my voice steadier now. "I am." The walls creaked again, louder, less controlled. "You don't need her," it said. "Maybe not," I said, "but I need something real." That word seemed to hit it, not like a blow, more like a disruption, a mismatch. Its expression flickered, just for a second, and in that second I moved, not backward, not toward the wall, forward, straight at it. I don't know why. Instinct, maybe, desperation. But I reached out, not to touch it, to push past it. And for a moment, my hand passed through it, not like mist, not like air, like something thin, something that didn't quite hold together. The illusion broke, the room shattered, not into pieces, into layers. And suddenly, I wasn't in my house anymore. I was somewhere else, dark, wide open, the air cold and heavy again. The ground beneath me hard, stone this time, not soil. And ahead of me, a building. No, not a building. A structure, large, tall, rising into the dark above like a broken cathedral. Its walls were tangled with something that looked like roots or wires or veins. I couldn't tell. They ran along the surface, across the ground, disappearing into the stone like they belonged there. "Eleanor!" Joyce's voice again, closer now. I turned. She stood a short distance away, breathing hard, her face pale but sharp with focus. "You were just standing there," she said, "staring at nothing." I couldn't. "I was inside," I said. Her expression tightened. "Yeah, I figured." "That wasn't just a trick," I added. "It was trying to keep me there." "I know," she replied. "That's what it does." A low sound rolled through the space, not from behind us, from ahead, from the structure. I turned back. The entrance was open, dark, but not empty. Something moved inside. "Is that where he is?" I asked. Joyce didn't answer immediately. She didn't need to. We both knew. Graham hadn't stopped, hadn't turned back. He'd come straight here. "Stay behind me," she said quietly. I almost laughed at that, but I didn't argue. We stepped forward together. The ground beneath us was smooth now, worn in a way that suggested something had traveled this path many times before. The air grew thicker as we approached, harder to breathe, harder to think, and then we stepped inside. The darkness didn't swallow us this time. It revealed something. Rows, shapes, forms. At first I thought they were pillars, tall, thin structures lining the interior. But as my eyes adjusted, I realized they weren't pillars, they were people, or what had once been people, standing, suspended, Their bodies stretched slightly, held in place by those same root-like tendrils that covered the walls. The tendrils wrapped around their arms, their torsos, their necks, holding them upright like they were part of the structure itself. Their faces, God, their faces were still, eyes open, mouths parted, frozen somewhere between pain and something else, something quieter. "They're still alive," I whispered. Joyce shook her head slowly. "Not in any way that matters." A figure stood at the far end, different from the others. Seated, bound more heavily, the tendrils around him thicker, darker, pulsing faintly like they were carrying something. Graham, or what was left of him. His head hung forward. His chest rose and fell slowly, too slowly, as if breathing wasn't something his body remembered how to do properly anymore. "Graham?" I said. No response. Joyce stepped closer. Her grip tightened on the axe she'd somehow managed to keep hold of through all of this. "Is he?" She started. "He's not gone," I said. But I wasn't sure if that was true, because as we got closer, I saw the details. The tendrils weren't just holding him in place. They were inside him, piercing his arms, his chest, even his face. Thin lines disappearing into his skin, threading through him like he was part of a system, like he was feeding something or being fed. His eyes opened, slow, but aware. They found mine. And for a moment, I saw it, the thing I'd glimpsed earlier. Not conviction, not understanding, regret, deep, crushing. "Wait!" Graham's voice cracked through the space, raw and panicked. The first real fear I'd heard from him since this began. Joyce didn't stop. She stepped closer, the axe raised but not yet swung, her eyes fixed on him, not cruel, not angry, but resolved. Like she'd already crossed the point where hesitation mattered, the tendrils reacted instantly. They tightened, all at once. A violent contraction that forced Graham's body upward against the restraints, his back arching, his mouth opening in a sound that didn't quite make it out. "Don't," he gasped, struggling against something that wasn't just physical anymore. "If you do this, it'll notice." "It already has," Joyce snapped. And she was right. I could feel it. The space around us had changed. The air was heavier, denser, like pressure building before a storm. The faint hum that had been present since we entered this place was louder now, not audible exactly, but felt, vibrating somewhere behind my ribs. The tendrils pulsed, faster, in sync, not random, responsive, watching. "You don't understand," Graham said, his voice trembling, his eyes darting between us. "It's not just me anymore. I'm part of it. If you break that, then it breaks with you," I said. He looked at me, and for a second, he didn't argue, because he knew that was the truth. The tendrils tightened again, sharper this time, digging into him, as if something deeper in the structure was reacting to the conversation itself. A low, distant sound rolled through the chamber, not from above, not from around us, from everywhere. A shift, a recognition. "It knows," Graham whispered. Joyce adjusted her stance, gripping the axe tighter. "Then we don't waste time," she said. "Joyce," I started. She glanced at me. "What?" she said. "Are you sure?" I asked. Because even now, even after everything, there was something in me that hesitated. Not because Graham didn't deserve it, but because of what might happen next. Because this place didn't follow rules. And if Graham was part of it, what did killing him actually do? Joyce's expression softened, just slightly. "I'm not sure of anything," she admitted. "But I know this doesn't stop unless we do something." That was enough. It had to be. I nodded. "Then make it quick," I said. Graham shut his eyes, not in acceptance, in dread. The tendrils began to move, not tightening now, shifting, drawing inward, toward him, like whatever was connected to him was pulling closer, protecting, or preparing. "Please," he whispered. "I didn't mean for this to happen." "I know," Joyce said quietly, and then she swung. The sound was wet, final. The axe struck deep into his chest, the impact sending a jolt through the tendrils, a ripple that spread outward across the structure like a shockwave. Graham's body jerked once, twice, then went still. The tendrils froze, completely. For a fraction of a second, everything stopped. The hum, the movement, even the pressure in the air. And then, it screamed. Not Graham, not anything human. The place screamed. A sound that didn't come from one direction, but from every surface at once. The walls, the floor, the air itself. A tearing, grinding noise that felt like something enormous had just been woken up too suddenly. Joyce staggered back. What is that?" The tendrils convulsed, violently. They tore free from Graham's body in jerking motions. snapping back into the walls, the floor, the ceiling, leaving behind dark, wet streaks that didn't stay where they landed. Graham slumped forward in the chair, his body collapsing in on itself like something that had only been held together by what was now gone. And then the chamber began to change. Cracks spread across the walls, not like stone breaking, like something unmaking itself. The ground shifted beneath us, tilting slightly, sending loose debris sliding toward the center. "It's collapsing," I said. Joyce grabbed my arm. "Then we move. Now." But move where? The entrance behind us. It wasn't there anymore. Or if it wasn't where it had been. The space had shifted, rewritten. The path we'd taken in was gone. A low rumble rolled through the chamber as something above gave way, chunks of dark material falling from the unseen ceiling and shattering against the ground in heavy, echoing impacts. "We need a way out," Joyce said, her voice tight now, scanning the space. "I know," I snapped, my heart hammering. The tendrils weren't just retracting anymore. They were pulling back. All of them. Retreating deeper into the structure, into whatever lay beyond the walls, like a tide rushing out. And as they pulled away, something else was revealed. Behind Graham, in the structure itself, an opening. Not clean, not deliberate, but real. A tear, a wound in the space. And through it, light. Not the artificial glow of the street lamps, not the dim, flickering light of this place. Real light. Daylight. My breath caught. "Joyce," I pointed. She turned. "Saw it. Is that?" "I think so," I said. "I think that's..." Another crack split the wall, widening the opening, spilling more light into the chamber. It hurt my eyes. After all the darkness, it was almost too bright to look at. But it was real. It had to be. "That's our way out," Joyce said. We didn't hesitate. We ran. The ground shifted beneath us with every step, cracks widening, sections of the floor collapsing inward as the structure continued to unravel around us. Something massive moved above. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it. A presence. Enormous. Angry. Not directed at us specifically, but at the loss, at the break, at thing we'd taken away. "Faster!" Joyce shouted. I didn't need telling twice. We reached the opening just as another section of the chamber gave way behind us, the sound of it collapsing swallowed by that same impossible scream. Up close, the light was blinding. Blinding and wrong, because it wasn't just light, it was outside. I could see it now. Dirt, grass, the faint outline of the street beyond. But the opening itself, it wasn't a tunnel. It wasn't a doorway. It was... "Graham," I whispered. Joyce didn't respond, because she saw it too. The opening wasn't in the wall. It was in him, his body. For a while, neither of us spoke. We just lay there in the mud, side by side, staring up at the same dull gray sky that had been there the whole time, as if nothing had happened, as if the world hadn't just split open beneath our feet and shown us something it should have kept hidden. I remember thinking how normal everything looked. That's what unsettled me most. The same clouds, the same faint drizzle, the same distant hum of traffic from the main road, even the faint barking of a dog somewhere further down the estate. All of it exactly as it should be, like the last, I don't even know how long, hadn't happened at all. I pushed myself up slowly, my arms trembling with the effort. "Joyce?" I said. She didn't answer straight away, just lay there, chest rising and falling in shallow breaths, her eyes fixed on the sky. Then after a few seconds, she turned her head slightly. "You see it too, don't you?" she asked. I followed her gaze. The hole, Graham's garden, it was still there, but it wasn't what we'd left behind. It wasn't deep anymore, not impossibly wide, not wrong, just a hole dug, messy, something you'd expect from a group of people who'd spent a shifting earth with no real plan. No sign of the slope, no sign of the opening, no sign of the space beneath. "No," I whispered. "No, that's not." Joyce sat up sharply. "No," she agreed, her voice firmer now. "That's not what we saw." But it was what we were seeing now, and that was the problem. Because if this was real, then what had the rest of it been? We both turned at the same time. The street, Briar Lane, it was full. People stood in clusters along the pavement, some closer to the garden, others hanging back. Faces I recognized. Neighbors. People who'd been there earlier. Only. Not all of them. Too many were missing. There were gaps. Places where people should have been, and everyone who remained, they looked confused. Not terrified, not traumatized, just disoriented, like they'd walked into a room and forgotten why they were there. "What happened?" someone asked. I turned. It was a man from further down the lane, Colin, I think. He looked at the hole, then at us, his brow furrowed. "You two all right?" he added. I stared at him. "Do you remember?" I asked. "Remember what?" "The digging," I said. I hesitated. "The hole, people going down." "Callum," he shook his head slowly. "We were just standing here," he said. "Talking about it, weren't we? Graham's gone a bit funny digging at all hours." My stomach dropped. "No," I said. "That's not." Joyce touched my arm. I stopped because she'd seen it too. The blankness. Not ignorance, not denial, absence. Like something had been taken out of them. Not their memories entirely, just the part that mattered. A police car pulled into the cul-de-sac. Then another, lights flashing but no sirens. 2 officers stepped out, scanning the scene, their expressions already leaning toward inconvenience rather than concern. One of them approached us. "You two all right?" he asked, glancing between us and the hole. "We've had a call about some sort of disturbance." Joyce let out a short, humorless laugh. "That's one way of putting it." The officer raised an eyebrow. "Care to explain?" I opened my mouth, closed it again. Because what was I supposed to say? There's a place under the ground that eats people's grief and replaces them with nothing? We just climbed out of a man's chest to get here, even thinking it sounded insane. Joyce answered instead. "There was a bit of a situation," she said carefully. "People got carried away, digging. It got out of hand." The officer looked at the hole again, then at the gathered neighbors, then back at us. "And now, it's over," she said. "That part at least was true." He nodded slowly. "Right?" he said. "Well, we'll need statements, names, anyone who was involved." I felt something tighten in my chest. "Some people are missing," I said. He paused. "Missing?" "Yes," I insisted. "Callum Reed, Martin Hargreaves, Darren." He frowned. "Those people live on this street?" I blinked. "Yes." He turned to the other officer. "Can you check that?" he said. The second officer nodded, already pulling out his radio. I looked at Joyce. Her expression had gone very still. "They don't remember them," she said quietly. "No," I whispered. "They don't." The officer turned back to us. "All right," he said. "We'll look into it. But for now, I'd suggest you both head inside. Get cleaned up. You look like you've had a rough morning." A rough morning. I almost laughed, but nothing came out. They dug up the garden later that day, properly this time, with equipment, with barriers, with people who knew what they were doing. They found nothing. No cavity, no structure, no sign of collapse, just soil. Layers of it, undisturbed beyond the depth we'd reached. It made no sense. It couldn't make sense. But that didn't stop it from being real. They called it a case of collective hysteria. That was the official term. A group of people feeding off each other's behavior. What do you think really happened? Was it all in their minds? Or did they uncover something that should never have been found? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your theories. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss truly terrifying horror stories and unsolved mysteries. Hit like if you found this story compelling and want more disturbing, spine-chilling content like this.